have rights to the TED Talk. I appreciate it.
Is this working now?
Yes, it's good. Yeah, I think it's good to go. Right?
I want you to close your eyes and imagine a beautiful, young, black man. Now imagine that you have the honor of listening in on a business conversation that he's having. The ideas and strategies that he's declaring are amazing and inspiring. He is brilliant. And still there is a wave of humility and grace about him. Now imagine he is dressed in several layers, some tattered and dirty, from facing the elements of Mother Nature because he lives on the streets of Harlem. The same brilliant business conversations that you are privy to, he is having out loud to no one in particular that you can see. You can open your eyes. I want to introduce you to Mr. Braun. Mr. Braun is a brilliant black man who was a high-level executive and now lives on the streets of Harlem. He now wears layers of dirty clothing and has conversations out loud to himself. He is experiencing both homelessness and schizophrenia. I have grown quite fond of Mr. Braun over the last several months. We shoot the bull when he comes in almost daily to work in the computer lab of my agency. We bond over bodega coffee when I find him outside, curled over copious notes in folders on the sidewalk. And I find that there is literally nothing I can teach this man about being a black man in Harlem who is experiencing both homelessness and schizophrenia, I'm sure among other things. As I check exactly 0 of those boxes myself, I stay in my rightful place as learner and lean in to what my quote-unquote teacher is saying. I listen, I watch, I ask questions, I wrestle internally, and sometimes I share my thoughts. Now, like I said before, I've grown quite fond of Mr. Braun, and so you can imagine my surprise and potential disgust when an older white woman passed my open office door and proclaimed to the receptionist that she had to leave because he smelled and was talking to himself. I had high hopes that the receptionist would respond in a way that held Mr. Braun's dignity intact. Yet I was further confused when she responded, "I know, she lets him in here and I'll try to spray the air freshener." So let me tell you what you're not gonna do, was my initial reaction in my head. But before I let it out of my mouth, I hurried across to my supervisor and filled her in on what I had just overheard. We called in the woman and addressed her together. My supervisor, calm, cool, and collected, told her that while she understood the woman's concerns, she needed her to understand that we were happy he was here. Because if he was here, it means he's safe. She allowed me, not as calm or cool, to explain that I've gotten to know Mr. Braun, and that the man she perceives through her senses as a burden is actually a brilliant businessman. And the conversations she's hearing him have are likely business-related, that he's processing out loud as part of his experience of schizophrenia. I further explained that he's experiencing homelessness, and so he does the best he can with what he has in terms of hygiene. What I was aiming to get across was that he was fully capable of and enjoys engaging in conversation if she had just tried. And that they probably have more in common than she thinks. They're both receiving services at the same holistic recovery center after all. My heart sunk a little when she responded, "I understand, but he should just bathe." I had never been so acutely aware as I was in that moment at the privilege it is to be able to bathe. And I don't have to wonder to what extent being a black man with a mental illness further oppresses and alienates Mr. Braun, not just in his access to hygienic materials, but affordable housing, jobs, medical treatment, and so on. After she left the center, my supervisor and I shared a moment of tears, and all I could say was that made me so sad. We reflected on the moment and held the tension of understanding and incomprehension of the barriers built around our dear friend, Mr. Braun. We then went to the computer lab where he was still working, unaware of what had just transpired in the front of the agency. We connected with him. Connection to remind ourselves that, like Dr. Ellen Sachs, who experiences schizophrenia herself, says, the humanity we all share is more important than the mental illness we may not. And to speak into the gaps, what I think that I need to work on is not labeling people when I believe that they're in the wrong, thus diminishing their own differences in life experiences. And I also want to work on my emotional self-control. While I felt extremely safe and comfortable with my supervisor to cry and express my frustration, I may not always be in an agency where that's the case. Thank you.